We're going deep today, really deep, like thousands of feet under the Pacific Ocean deep.
Deeper than scuba gear can take you.
Way deeper. We're talking about Project Azorian, the CIA's unbelievably ambitious attempt to recover a Soviet submarine from the ocean floor.
It's a story that involves some seriously cutting-edge technology, Cold War paranoia, cloak and dagger secrecy, and, oh yeah, a sunken submarine armed with nuclear missiles.
You sent over a ton of research and articles on this, and honestly, it's mind-blowing.
Oh, it's a wild ride for sure. A fascinating blend of spycraft, engineering ingenuity, and some might say a healthy dose of Cold War craziness.
That's one way to put it. For our listeners, let's set the stage. It's 1968. The K-129, a Soviet Golf II-class submarine carrying nuclear missiles, just vanishes in the Pacific Ocean. Gone, without a trace.
Well, almost without a trace. The Soviets, they searched and searched, but they couldn't find a thing.
But the United States had a few tricks up their sleeve, right? They knew something was up, or rather, they heard something.
Right. Enter the SOSUS network, this massive underwater listening system the U.S. Navy had set up, initially to keep tabs on Soviet subs. On March 8th, 1968, they picked up a significant acoustic event, an explosion.
And that explosion.
That was, in likelihood, the K-129's death knell the moment it went down.
Okay, but here's where things get crazy. Not only did the U.S. know the sub sank, but they also had a pretty good idea about where it went down. We're talking about finding a needle in a haystack the size of, well, the entire Pacific Ocean.
And to find that needle, they sent out the USS Halibut.
Not your average submarine. This thing was a purpose-built spy sub.
Oh, the Halibut was special. Equipped with some of the most advanced underwater cameras and robotic systems at the time, perfect for deep-sea surveillance.
So what did the Halibut find?
The Halibut found the K-129, or at least what was left of it. It had broken apart on the ocean floor.
Right.
And that was a crucial discovery because it meant the CIA wouldn't have to try and raise the entire submarine.
Which, let's be honest, would have been
Impossible. Even with their technology, raising that whole thing, forget it. This way, they could focus on recovering specific sections, the ones most likely to hold valuable intelligence.
Which was? What exactly? What were they hoping to get their hands on?
Their top priority. The submarine's code books and cryptographic equipment. Imagine being able to decrypt Soviet naval communications. It would have been a game changer for U.S. intelligence during the Cold War.
Right, like having a direct line into the Soviet Navy's strategy talks.
Precisely. But they were also very interested in the nuclear missile itself, its design, its capabilities, anything they could learn about Soviet military technology.
Okay, so they found it, photographed it. Now they had to figure out how to actually get this thing from 16,500 feet below the ocean's surface.
No easy feat. And they needed a really, really good cover story.
And that's where Howard Hughes enters the picture. Okay, you have to admit, this is brilliant.
It's a genius. The CIA cooked up this story about Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire, developing new technology to mine manganese nodules.
Manganese what?
Manganese nodules. They're these potato-shaped lumps that form on the ocean floor.
Okay, so they used Howard Hughes' reputation for being a little out there to hide this incredibly secretive mission.
Exactly. It was a brilliant cover story, perfect for the time. Who'd question Howard Hughes dabbling in something as weird as deep-sea mining?
Okay, but even with the world's best cover story, they still needed the technology to pull this off.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about the Hughes Glomar Explorer. This was no ordinary ship, right?
Oh, absolutely not. The Glomar Explorer was a marvel of engineering, custom-built by Sun Shipbuilding for this one specific crazy mission. Imagine a ship over 600 feet long, equipped with this massive claw-like capture vehicle designed to grab a chunk of submarine from miles underwater.
They named it Clementine, this giant claw. Was it named after the folk song by any chance?
You know, I've always wondered that. I like to think so.
No.
But here's the really incredible part. This ship had a massive internal, well, what they call a moon pool. Picture a giant opening going right through the middle of the ship all the way down to the water.
So they could bring the recovered section up through this moon pool, completely hidden inside the ship. Talk about James Bond levels of cool. Okay, before they even thought about lowering Clementine, they needed super clear, high-resolution images of that K-129 wreck.
And for that, they brought in this brilliant guy, Joe Houston, a genius when it came to underwater optics. He was tasked with designing a camera system that could withstand the insane pressure and complete darkness that far down.
Okay, I have to ask, how do you even begin to test something like that? It's not like they could just hop in a submarine and go take a look.
You're absolutely right. It's not that simple. And that brings us to one of the most unexpectedly low-tech, yet crucial parts of this whole story, the catfish solution.
The catfish solution. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What is this, some kind of spy jargon I don't know about?
No, it's actually quite literal. See, Houston needed a large, deep body of water to test his camera prototypes in. And what did he choose? A cranberry bog.
A cranberry bog. Okay, now that does not sound very high-tech.
I know, right? It's not exactly what you picture when you think of top-secret CIA operations. But Houston figured that a cranberry bog, with its murky water and light scattering, would mimic the conditions of the deep ocean pretty well. So he sets up his prototype camera system in this bog, complete with strobe lights, and starts snapping pictures.
So what happened? Did the cranberry bog work?
Well, they developed the test photos, and they were greeted with all these weird streaks and shadows in the images. They were completely baffled at first. They couldn't figure out what was causing it. Turns out it was catfish.
Catfish?
Catfish, swimming through the strobe lights and messing up the photos.
You're telling me catfish almost derailed this massive CIA operation? That's hilarious.
It's a good thing those catfish didn't know they were messing with the CIA.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were able to use that catfish solution to adjust the camera design, get the images they needed of the K-129, and eventually build Clementine.
Clementine, the claw, snatching Soviet secrets from the ocean floor. Okay, I have one question, though. Were the Soviets completely in the dark about all of this?
Not entirely. Remember all those prep missions the CIA sent out before the Glomar Explorer? The ones disguised as oceanographic research vessels.
Right. Blending in with all the other science-y stuff going on out there.
Well, the Soviets, they weren't fooled. They knew something was up, and they kept a close eye on those missions. And eventually, even on the Glomar Explorer itself, they even sent some of their own ships out there to observe.
So it's a Cold War showdown on the high seas, with everyone pretending they're not interested in this massive ship trying to pull a submarine out of the ocean?
Like a slow-motion car chase, but underwater, and with much higher stakes. Both sides really went to incredible lengths during the Cold War to one-up each other.
Speaking of going to incredible lengths, let's talk about the recovery operation itself. It's the summer of 1974. The Glomar Explorer is finally in position above the wreck site. How did they even begin to lift something that heavy from that deep?
Okay, imagine you're on this giant ship, right? And you're trying to hold it perfectly still over a very specific spot on the ocean floor, thousands of feet below you. It's like, I don't even know. Trying to balance a basketball on a string in a hurricane?
Sounds impossible.
It was a huge, huge challenge for sure. But somehow they managed to do it, at least to some extent. They lowered Clementine down to the ocean floor. And get this, they actually managed to grab hold of a section of the K-129.
They got it. So did they bring it up? What happened next?
This is where things take another unexpected turn. See, as they were bringing it up, there was a major mechanical failure with Clementine.
A mechanical failure? What do you mean?
Some reports suggest that several of the arms on Clementine malfunctioned. Probably an issue with the materials they used, which, when you think about the immense pressure at those depths, isn't that surprising?
So close. They were so close to getting it.
I know. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And tragically, a significant part of what they had managed to raise, that section of the K-129, it broke off.
Oh.
Yeah, it plunged back down to the ocean floor.
I bet that was a devastating blow to the entire team. So after all that, what did they actually recover?
Well, they were able to hold onto the portion of the sub's bow that they grabbed.
Mm-hmm.
And they also recovered the bodies of 6 Soviet submariners.
Oh, wow. That's really heavy.
It really makes you think about the human cost of this whole thing. Mm-hmm. It's easy to get caught up in the technology, the intrigue, the Cold War rivalry. But real lives were lost in this. And this is a strange footnote to this whole story, but the CIA, they actually gave footage of the burial at sea to the Russian government.
They filmed the burial.
Yeah, they did. It was a gesture, a very small one, of respect, a recognition of those lives lost, even in the midst of this incredibly secretive intelligence operation.
That's wild. What about the code books, the cryptographic equipment, all that? Was any of that in the section they recovered?
That's the million-dollar question, or I guess in this case more like the $800 million question.
Yeah, correct.
Because that's roughly how much this whole thing cost.
Oh.
And unfortunately, we just don't know for sure. The CIA has never officially confirmed what exactly they did or didn't get from the K-129. It's still classified to this day.
Typical. Some secrets never see the light of day. But you know what they say, leaks happen.
Oh, they definitely happen. And in this case, it was a series of almost comical events that blew the lid off Project Azorian. Remember that cover story with Howard Hughes and the manganese nodules?
Right, the world's most elaborate deep-sea mining operation that wasn't actually a mining operation at all.
Exactly. Well, get this. Before the Glomar Explorer even set sail, there was a break-in at one of Howard Hughes's offices.
Wait. You're saying this top-secret, super high-tech mission was almost derailed by a burglary?
Sounds crazy, right? But that's what happened. And you have to remember, this was the 1970s Watergate, the Pentagon Papers, a lot of mistrust in the government. So when news of this break-in at Hughes's office started to spread, along with rumors of a secret CIA project, well, let's just say it caught the attention of some very, very persistent journalists.
And that's where Seymour Hersh comes in.
Yep. Seymour Hersh, one of those famous investigative journalists ever. This is the same guy who broke the My Lai massacre story during the Vietnam War. So he hears about all this, and he starts digging around. And at the same time, the Los Angeles Times, they caught wind of the story as well. They even ran a piece connecting Howard Hughes to the CIA and this mysterious salvage operation.
So the CIA's cover is blown. What did they do?
They went into full-on damage control mode. They tried everything to convince Hersh and the LA Times to kill the story.
Did it work?
Not really. They managed to stall for a bit, but the story was already out there. And then another journalist, Jack Anderson, he went on national television and boom, confirmed the whole thing. Project Azorian was front-page news.
So much for secrecy. How did people react to this bombshell?
It was a disaster for the CIA. Public opinion, not good. Remember, this was the post-Watergate era. People were already skeptical of the government.
Right, all those Cold War fears about government spying and cover-ups.
Exactly. And this just played right into it. Suddenly, it wasn't just about a sunken submarine anymore. It was about government overreach, about secrecy and potential abuse of power.
What about the Soviets? What was their reaction to the news?
Well, they couldn't exactly say, we had no idea. They knew they'd lost that submarine. Now the whole world knew the U.S. had tried to retrieve it. A bit of a blow to their pride, I'd imagine.
You think?
Publicly, though, they downplayed the whole thing. They claimed the sub was just carrying ordinary torpedoes, nothing particularly sensitive.
Yeah, right. Like, they'd admit the U.S. might have gotten their hands on Soviet nuclear secrets.
Exactly, but you can bet behind closed doors there were some very serious discussions happening in Moscow.
I can only imagine. So did the CIA ever try to finish the job? Did they ever go back to try and recover the rest of the K-129?
They had plans to, but after all the media attention, it was just too risky. The Soviets were watching their every move, and the element of surprise was long gone.
So much for that. All that planning, all that engineering, all that risk, and they only got a small part of the sub? I bet that was a tough pill to swallow for the people who poured their hearts and souls into this mission.
It was a setback, definitely. But even though it wasn't perfect, Project Azorian did push the limits of deep-sea engineering and showed just how far superpowers would go during the Cold War to gain an advantage over each other. They really were willing to go to any lengths.
Incredible. This deep dive into Project Azorian has been amazing. Thanks for sharing all of this with us. I feel like I've learned so much.
It's a fascinating story, that's for sure.
And I think it makes you wonder what else is still down there, hidden in the depths of the ocean or in some top-secret government file somewhere. Anyways, until next time, keep exploring. You never know what secrets are waiting to be discovered.